Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Kazaz. I'm now going to say current author of Training with the SEAL, as I am slowly, but I am posting chapters from my adventures and the book on Substack. So check that out. Today's guest has been on the show. Actually, I think it's like almost a little bit over a year since we first had him on. Fan favorite. Excited to have him back. As I give you the bio, you're going to know who he is. He was a Navy SEAL following his father's footsteps. So I'm sure that right there gave you who I'm talking to. But to give you more information, in 2011, a parachuting accident left him paralyzed. Instead of letting it define him, he rebuilt his life with faith, grit, and a new mission. He is now a husband, father of 3, chairman of the board at VIP Neuro Rehab Center, and even took on the Yukon 1000, the world's toughest kayak race. His story is proof that even after life changes in an instant, resilience can carry you further than fear. Ladies and gentlemen, excited to welcome back to the show, David Charbonnet. David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, such a pleasure. I love talking with you and hearing from you and what you're doing. I'm obviously following your journey and all the stuff that you've been doing since we've last connected almost a year ago, actually a little over a year ago. And I wanted to bring you back. I wanted to talk about the race that you recently did, Yukon 1000. Before we get into it and I ask questions about it, talk to me about, tell our audience exactly what it is. I know I mentioned, the world's toughest kayaking race, but go into detail about what it is, why you decided to do it, and all that stuff.
But I guess firstly, why we ended up doing it. My friend who I went through SEAL training with, Chad Wright, a lot of people know from online, and
he was on the show.
Yeah. He was also a guest on the show. He's been wanting to, for years, do some sort of ultra event. He wanted to do an ultra run where he pushes me in a wheelchair, which I was like, Chad, that's basically pushing me in a stroller. I was like, that's humiliating, and I don't want to do it for 30 hours with you in the woods. So he had asked that for, I don't know how many years. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, no, I don't have no interest in doing that. 2 years ago, he brought it up again. And I was like, man, if I would do something with you that I could do with you. He just kind of mentioned, he's like, well, I've been meaning, I've always wanted to do this race up in the Yukon, this kayak race. And it's a 2-person race. And I was like, yeah, that's like what I'm talking about. I would do something like that. And mind you, I'm not like an ultra athlete, at this time. I guess I don't know if I still technically am not. I get home and I'm like thinking about it and I'm like, oh, I wonder what, I need to look up that race. So I pull it up online and the first like header on it says more people will summit Everest than have gone down this part of the Yukon. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And so I texted him. I was like, hey man, I'm going to contact the race director to see if they'll even let me do this race, but I'm interested if they'll let me. I mean, this race is extremely dangerous. You're like on your own. They tell you on the website how dangerous it is. And I'm like, they're not going to let a guy in a wheelchair do this race. So I emailed the race director and we have like a Zoom call, and he's an awesome dude, John. He's a former Royal Marine. He gets on the call, and I guess he had looked me up online before the call. And he's like, hey mate, I looked you up. You'll be fine. If you want to sign up, do it. And I was like, all right. The fact that you're this relaxed about it actually worries me a little bit. So anyways, that was like the start of it. And so I started kayaking 2 years ago and started kayaking with the team out here in San Diego and met just a bunch of awesome people, not least of which is my coach, Chris Barlow, who's now one of my closest friends, just an amazing guy. And that's been kind of the theme of this whole journey, is just making these amazing relationships along the way. But, the Yukon 1000 is a 1,000-mile kayak race down the Yukon from Whitehorse, Canada, not Dawson City. You go through Dawson City all the way into Alaska, and then the end of the race is like basically in the middle of nowhere when the highway crosses the river. It's completely unsupported, which means you can't have any like drop points of like resupply or it's really any contact with the outside world. Everything you are bringing or that you need to bring with you. So you load out, 10 days worth of food, snacks, you bring like water pumps and, different water filtration systems, whatever else you need, medical supplies. Your first emergency response is each other. And then the next emergency response is the other race teams. Even though it's a race and you're competing with each other, you're very much so realize you have a camaraderie about, you really want everyone to do well. You just feel this like pull for each other and you want everyone to be okay. It's a real deal race. I felt like I wasn't taking it lightly, but I certainly didn't fully realize what was coming. But fortunately, I took it seriously, like I said. So for the last 2 years, I was training every day, multiple times a day. My wife basically let it be my job as like a professional athlete of just preparing for this. And so that's been the 2-year journey. And then last July, we finally got to go do it. And it was pretty epic. It didn't, go as planned, but it was a heck of a journey.
Did you talk to people prior who have accomplished it before you stepped into it? Like, how did you also know how to train for it? And what did that training look like?
Randomly, my coach was like, "Oh, I think I coached a guy who ended up doing it." And he was like, "I can probably get his contact info." He's an adventure racer. Him and his partner actually still have the world record time for it. They just killed themselves. So it was like 5.5 day, which is incredible speed for that race. So I talked to him. His name is Daniel. I forget his last name. So I talked to him, and that's the funny thing about these types of races is like, he didn't really have like a training plan advice or anything, but he was like, he's like, you got to keep moving. He did have advice on like equipment and like what they did as far as nutrition and stuff like that. But as far as like training, it was kind of like an experiment because I'm completely using my upper body. It's kind of a balance of like, how much can my upper body handle and recover from? I mean, obviously we knew it was going to be a lot of like zone 2 and endurance work. I kind of like live my life in zone 2, being in a wheelchair, pushing around. Whenever you're pushing around, you're kind of like a little bit in that like kind of exercise mode because it's a little bit more effort maybe. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and train with the San Diego canoe and kayak team and paddle for like, an hour or two. And sometimes we work out as a team. So sometimes their workouts were like sprint workouts or different things like that. So it wasn't always catered to like my race, but I think that's good to have to do what other people's programs are sometimes because it's outside of like what you want to do, and there's value in that. But then, I'd come home, maybe eat something, and then I'd get on like the ski erg for a couple hours and like watch a movie while I did the ski erg in like a zone 2, heart rate. And then I typically lifted weights, which I don't know if that was valuable for the Yukon or not, but you gotta keep the muscles and trying not to get old. I'm 40 years old now, so you gotta do that stuff to stay in shape. It was a fun thing to prepare for. Getting all the equipment was like, it was a very expensive journey, which we were really blessed. Chad has a good relationship with First Form. They came on board to sponsor the whole thing. Here I got the First Form shirt on and everything. So they sponsored us and they had like film crews with us and stuff. And at some point there is going to be some video about kind of the preparation and the journey and the race. And so getting all that stuff figured out we were kind of on our own in a lot of ways. Chad has a good idea of like how much calories he burns in like an endurance race sort of, and like how much he needs to eat. And I felt like my calorie intake was less because I was not using as many muscles being paralyzed. So we try to figure that out. We did do a 3-day journey out in the Altamaha River in Georgia, which was super valuable to kind of work out some of our systems. And I think that was like the best preparation for the actual race.
What did you learn during that 3-day preparation that helped prepare you for then going out to do the Yukon 1000?
One thing was that it was definitely the furthest I had paddled and the longest I had paddled in one stretch was that first day on the Altamaha, we paddled for like 10 hours or like 9 hours, I think, that first day, and it hurt, so that was like eye-opening. We're like, oh man, we're gonna have to do like double this every day, because in the Yukon it doesn't get dark, so you paddle until the stop period. There's a 6-hour stop period every night that you're required to stop and rest. So you paddle basically until, I think it was like 11 p.m. was the stop period start. And then so you're looking for a island or something just to pull up on and quickly get your camp up, maybe boil some water for the food, and then try to get like 2 hours of sleep. Because setting up the camp and taking down the camp, at least for us, it took like an hour 45 every time. So you really don't have a whole lot of time to sleep, because then you set up the camp, boil the water, do stuff you got to do, try to sleep real quick, which I tell everybody, you sleep really good out there because it's so limited. Then you wake up and go. So on the Altamaha, we were like not paddling as long because it would get dark, so you'd have to stop. So we figured out that it does take a pretty long amount of time to set up camp. I think we were like hopeful that it was going to be like 20-30 minutes, but it was not even close. And by the time you finish like doing all the stuff you had to do, and it just kind of got you in the groove of how it was going to be. Also for me, like being in a wheelchair, obviously I didn't bring my wheelchair out into the Yukon wilderness. A friend of mine named Wes Inskeep built like a drag bag for my legs. So it was like a waterproof zip up bag that was real strong fabric. So I would just drag myself across the ground. That would keep me out of the mud. So scooting around like in the swamps in Georgia, doing the same up in the Yukon. Most of your time is in the boat, getting used to living in that boat, peeing in bottles. And we kind of figured out our like rest intervals we wanted, because since your both hands are occupied when you're paddling, you have to have like a couple minutes every hour to like put your paddle down, drink some water, throw some peanut butter in your mouth, and then if you have to pee then, or whatever. So you do have I think on the Yukon we did every hour, and then we would stop for 5 minutes to do that stuff. And I mean, it goes fast. Like that 5 minutes you're having a rush to like drink water, shove some food in your mouth, zip up all the dry bags that are on your decks real quick and get paddling again. It was good to work out all that stuff in Georgia. So we were like, we knew what we wanted to do when we got up to the Yukon. But it is, every step of it, you had to just be flexible. When we got to the Yukon, the boat that we rented for the race was smaller than the one that we used in the Altamaha. We like couldn't fit all the stuff that we had in it. So we had to like decide what we weren't going to bring and stuff like that. Just figuring out kind of that stuff. And it's like, you learn so much too. Like this time, as soon as we like got off the river this last time, we were like, dude, if we ever do that again, we're going to do it so good. like how we packed the boat, like everything. Like we bought all these expensive dry bags, and every single one of them I think leaked. But we had these, they're called bear bags. They're like really heavy duty Ziploc bags. And we used those for some things because some of the dry bags were too big. So we had used those as like dry bags, and those worked great. Nothing ever got wet. They were clear, so you could see what was in it. And so it was really easy to find your stuff. But then all the expensive dry bags got wet. I was like, it's so stupid. We're just going to use these next time. Like just use Ziplocs. But little stuff like that, we're like, oh man, if we do this again, we could do it so good. But you just learn so much, so.
How is the sleep deprivation? Because like for myself, I mean, even like when I would do a road trip and I have an event the next day or something, like I am the type of person that will forego like any evening routine to just shut my eyes and go to sleep, because I am just like cannot function. And I just feel like human beings in general, we cannot function on no sleep or a small amount of sleep. I mean, the best way to, break somebody also is sleep deprivation. So how do you prepare for that? And how do you also and how was it for you the first couple of days with not getting any sleep. I mean, what was the struggle of doing all this?
First of all, I really hate not sleeping. When people ask about like SEAL training, they're like, "Did you ever have like a moment where you wanted to quit?" And I'm like, "No,
Oh
I didn't
yes, you
really."
mentioned this on the
And
show.
then I was like,
Yeah.
"Wait a second." Every single morning when my alarm went off, I wanted to quit. Like that was the time, and that was like truly, I hated that part of the military. I was like, "Why we gotta wake up so early?" And I still to this day, I hate. Like if I could, I would sleep until like noon, like I did when I was a teenager. Kind of, I guess it's a blessing that I deal with a lot of pain now. And so I don't really get a whole lot of sleep anymore. And so even when I traveled to Hungary to race kayaks that's a whole other story. But when I flew to Hungary, like I didn't get jet lagged because I was so used to like having terrible sleep at weird times and stuff. And so everyone was like jet lagged from the time change. I was like, I don't feel anything. So it was like kind of a weird superpower. And then in the Yukon, it was just kind of like, yeah, I was really tired. Like I would nod off while I was paddling. I've never dipped or like smoked or anything, but I did have nicotine pouches that I used on the river to help me not fall asleep. And they did work because we had like instant coffee for the morning, which I usually forewent because it was just like, I didn't have time to like, I mean, I was rushing packing stuff and trying to get the food in and all that. So I didn't really have time to, he would usually drink a coffee, but I just like, I don't have time to do that. We just didn't have a whole lot of caffeine out there. So the nicotine pouches helped us stay awake. He's a nicotine fiend and has always been since I've known him, but it really helped me because I could take like a tiny low dose nicotine pouch was very effective on me because I don't ever use them. And I still have them today in my car if I'm like driving and I'm getting tired. Now it's like a little tool I use in a pinch. It's not my favorite part, missing sleep. And when we ended up in the hotel, after we pulled out of the race, we slept a lot. So you catch up on it. But it's like one of those things where like you're so busy with the task at hand
Yeah.
that's kind you don't really think about it too much.
Well, I was thinking about falling asleep as you're doing it, like you paddle and then like
Oh yeah.
when you fall asleep, there goes your paddle, you might end up, I don't know. So I was curious in terms of like you mentioned, you're not off.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that is why they have that rest period because people would
Mhm.
be competitive and push through, and it's light enough to where you could do it. And you would get tired and start really having, cognitive issues to where if you're hallucinating or stuff like that. So, it's dangerous. I mean, you need to be paying attention all the time. So, nodding off is like not a good thing. There's lots of obstacles in the water. Falling
Like
in is
what?
not
Tell us about the obstacles.
like there's a lot. So the Yukon River freezes to like 8 feet thick ice every single winter. And then it breaks
Oh,
apart and the river just pushes all these massive chunks of ice through this landscape. And every year this happens, the breakup, and it just tears through, rips up everything in its path. And so this river changes all the time. And there's just massive tree blockages. It's like they call it the river of like a million islands. It's so the river kind of like braids and crisscrosses and there's all these bends and you have to like figure out which one has the fastest flow. It's not always like the most short distance that you want to take. It's a navigation problem. And so I was the navigator. And so I'm looking at the map and the GPS to kind of decide that, but Chad's paying attention to the flow of the river. Cause sometimes I'd be like, hey, up ahead, we're going to take the right hand bend. And then when we'd come around and see that, you could see that the water was not moving as fast through that bend. And we'd be like, okay, never mind, don't do that. Let's do this one. Or you could maybe see down the bend that there was like a tree blockage, which if you went down a bend and there's a tree blockage, it might have been race over for you. I mean,
right.
worst case scenario, you get caught in it and drown and die. You got to be really paying attention. There's a lot of pressure on the navigation in that sense, not just like having the best wear out, but also keeping us out of danger. Probably the biggest danger out there was drowning or hypothermia. So if you go in the water, it's not just like a little thing. The river at some points is miles wide. So you could be going for a long swim back to the shore. And by that, the river is very cold. So you're going to have to rewarm. A couple of teams ended up getting pulled out in the first day because they fell in crossing this lake, and there was a big wind storm during that part of the race, and we were having like 3-foot waves, and a couple teams fell in. We saw a couple of them like on the side, getting their warmies on and stuff to rewarm. Yeah, some teams pulled out because of it. And so it was, that was like the first day. It was like one of our least favorite that afternoon. The storm on the lake, it was awful. But I don't know how much you want me to get into the whole every day-to-day narrative, but
I didn't even know. I mean, I'm gonna sound. I mean, I just didn't know. I didn't know you could get like 3-foot waves in a river or lake or anything like that. Like that's just news to me right now. Did you train in an ocean? Did you train? Is that where were waves kind of normal for you in terms of where you trained?
yeah, so I did a couple ocean races with like my coach and out here in Southern California, but most of our training was on the flat water in the bay. But it gets windy and there's like pretty good chop and stuff, so you do have to like work on the stability. My coach was like kind of amazed because the first couple months, he's like, you're gonna fall in, it's just you're new and it takes some getting used to. But the water in San Diego is always cold, and as a former
Yeah.
SEAL, I hate being in cold water. So I like never fell in. I was always like on my P's and Q's with my balance. And so they were like, for forever, they were like, I don't know how, we never had a beginner to like just never fall in. And our mantra for the Yukon, I had a mantra, it's called no swimming. That's our mantra for the Yukon. So I was very on it about like not tipping over, because it is just going to be a huge pain in the butt in the best case scenario. And worst case scenario, it could be real dangerous. So, and I want to give Chad a huge amount of credit, because I trained for 2 years paddling every day. He did not have access to kayaking a whole lot. So he came out for a week and paddled with me in San Diego. And then we did 3 days in Georgia, and he did paddle, a little bit on his own, but he didn't have a Olympic coach like I did, telling him how to have good technique and all that stuff. So he did a week and really memorized his technique in a week with my coach out here in San Diego, and was a pretty competent paddler by the time, we got to the Yukon, which was really impressive, because it's kind of like the technique to really paddle efficiently in a kayak. It's kind of like a golf swing. It's like very frustrating. There's like a lot of every single body part. It's like when you do one thing right, the other thing's not working how it's supposed to. So he picked it up really, really fast, shined a light on how athletic he is to be able to, learn that skill really quickly. And, obviously he had the fitness level. We both did. That was something that was like never going to be a problem. Yeah, he picked up the technique really well. And then, so like, yeah, the first half of the day was like real fun. The river's pretty small at that point of the journey. It's like maybe a couple 100 yards wide. About halfway through the day, you get to this lake called Lake LaBarge, and it's I think it's like 30 miles long. You can't see the other side of it when you get there. It's just a really long lake, and it's a couple miles wide too. And so they tell you they want the race instructions to hug one side of the lake and not try to cut down the middle of it, which is like kind of tempting, because I can tell if we just went straight, it would be a like shorter distance. But it's a good thing we did, because after we got out there, I was like, man, if you went out in the middle of this lake, and because immediately a wind storm kicked up and was like pushing, like I said, like 3-foot waves like over our bow of our boat from like a rear quartering direction, which was really annoying. It just like it kept making you like turn. It would kick your bow or your stern like one way, and then you have to correct, and then the water just kept going over the boat, and it's like seeping. You had like spray skirts on, but it would still get over the spray skirt, and then so it was just really super annoying. And not wanting to fall in, I was definitely like on it with our balance, and Chad's got really good balance too, just naturally. So yeah, we were focusing, but it was really annoying. And I mean, you couldn't stop to like eat or drink, we'd have to like actually pull into like a cove or something that was hidden because you couldn't like put your hands down to like do something because the waves were too big. And we spent, I think, 8 hours doing that. So it was freaking miserable. And when we got to the other opening of the river and got tucked in there, we just looked back and we're like Labarge, we're never coming back here ever. Like, and so, yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, but if you fell over, if you did decide to go out in the middle of the lake, try to cut it and flipped over, that you got like a mile swim pulling your kayak. I mean, that could be it for you. So it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
that was kind of
also you had to hit a checkpoint at a certain time or day or at the end of the day, or you got disqualified. Is that correct?
on the fourth day. Yeah. That
The 4th day.
there's a city called, or a little town, really. It's like an Old West town called Dawson City. It's at 434 miles. And so you have to pass that. And then after that, you're really in the wild. I mean, it's pretty remote the whole time, but that's like kind of it. And then you're like really way out there as you go into Alaska. And so you have to hit that Dawson City by I forget how many hours, but it's like on the 4th day. That's like your first goal. And then initially we were like, that's gonna be easy to hit that time. But we made a couple of mistakes that cost us. I mean, Lake Labarge really slowed us down the first day. We didn't get as many miles as we wanted just because the windstorm. But even that is a blessing. If it had been a windstorm blowing in our face, we may still be on the river. I mean, it was when the wind was blowing in your face, you could like hardly go anywhere sometimes.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I know that from
yeah,
paddleboarding is like miserable
yeah,
when you're like, it
yeah.
really, yeah. So what mistakes did you guys have that caused some setbacks, and how did you guys recover and keep pushing forward?
I would say, I guess it was just really one mistake, but the other delays that cost us was the waves on Lake Labarge slowed us down a lot. And then we
Mhm,
had on the 3rd day, I think, we had
mhm,
about 8 hours of paddling into this wind, a
mhm.
headwind. I mean, it slowed us down so badly. And it's 7 hours. I mean, it was just forever. And that was my lowest point and during the trip. But the
It's a good thing
mistake
you got out early, though.
was that.
I said, "Good thing you got it out early, that was the lowest, like, the hardest part in a way, like, first."
Well, yeah, he's, I think Chad said that was his least favorite time was on that first day. Mine was on the 3rd day during that 7 hour headwind.
Oh,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's all really rough days. But
Yeah.
yeah, the mistake we made though was, like I said, you don't have that long to sleep. And so I was just like, I would just pass out and then Chad would like have his phone as the alarm for us to wake up and get going again. I forget what night it was. I guess it was the second night. He wakes me up and he's like, dude, we I don't know why we didn't hear the alarm and we're late and we had slept like 2 extra hours. We were like, oh no. So what we think happened was, we're sleeping like shoulder to shoulder, you're smashed in there. And what we think happened was just when we were sleeping that we like were on top of the phone or something and couldn't hear it. We should have, after that, I would also have, my phone alarm and we had multiple and we should have done that in the first place. But, I guess I was just tired and didn't think about it. That was a bad one. So that cost us a couple hours, which hurt. And so we were doing pretty good. I think we were like, kind of in the lead of the middle pack of teams. Like,
Mhm.
also, you don't know like where you're at as far as the rankings.
Do you
But
ever
from
see people out there? You see them out there, or
Yeah, especially the first couple days, you'll kind of like have teams that you're like around the same speed and you like kind of will pass each other back and forth as you take breaks or get tired or whatever and speed up. And so we had like a couple teams that we saw a lot of on the first day or two. And by a lot of, I mean like you saw a couple times. And then but I mean, you don't see anybody out there. You're for real alone. It's just you and the bald eagles, So but yeah, sleeping in that day hurt us. After that, we were like, okay, we really need to not like have any delays now, because we're getting closer to it being difficult to make the time. We had that headwind the next day where it was like 7 hours of just pushing on into our face. After that, it was like, okay, it's not up to us if we're going to make the cutoff. If God makes the conditions just where we can't make it, we're not going to make it. Like, you can't fight, you can't win against, nature. So we were like, we need to be pushing hard. We need to not take because like every now and then in the first days, you'd like stop to drink water on our 5-minute break, and you'd like kind of push it to like 6 minutes. Like, we need to be disciplined. After sleeping in that day, we're pretty disciplined on those breaks, disciplined on like our effort. You just have to keep moving. We always, kept each other up. We never really snapped at each other or like had those down moments to where we couldn't recover, mentally. And we were always checking on each other. There were like hours we could go by where you'd not say anything to one another, and you'd just be like, you good? Like, are you being quiet just because we're, don't have anything to say right now? Or are you being quiet because you're having a hard time? And, sometimes the answer was like, yeah, I'm struggling right now. And, so then you kind of, as a teammate, have to find a way to like pick them up. And we would do that for each other, every day. So it was, we just worked really well together. That was probably one of the best things. And one of the things that I really cherished about the whole experience.
Hey, quick pause before we dive back in. You know how we talk about building resilience, confidence, and mindset? There's a nonprofit helping kids do exactly that. Every mission starts with a story, but right now, 1 in 3 kids in America feels like they don't belong, and only 30% read at grade level. At Empower Lit, we're changing that one school at a time. Through author visits, literacy camps, team publishing programs, and Cosmo the Alien on YouTube, we help kids discover confidence through storytelling. When you give a monthly donation, you're not just donating, you're helping a child believe in themselves, their words, and their worth. Join the mission at empowerlitnonprofit.org, because belief is where every great story begins. All right, now back to the episode. Let's get into it. For somebody that is doing a team thing or a partner thing or something like that, and this could just relate to even if you're going into business with somebody or something like that, anything that's a team or a partner. Now, you and Chad have a history. You guys, have been friends for a while. You also been through things that people didn't do, like buds and things like that automatically connect you, bond you, right? What are some things advice that you have for somebody that is looking to build a stronger teammate or relationship or a partnership that you and Chad have that others can get from that?
A couple kind of pieces of advice I would have just off the top of my head. One is be genuine. Chad and I, for instance, we're never like putting up a front with each other. We're always honest with each other, and that's just good practice for anything, with whether it be with a boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife, a business partner, for sure. And so being genuine is important. Communicating with each other is important. Like I said, we're always checking on each other, being honest with where we were, like not just saying we were okay when we weren't. The other thing was, and this is not easy, I guess, but before we started the race, I knew that Chad was not going to let me die out there. He was going to do everything he could to keep me safe and bring me home to my wife and kids. And I think he knew that I felt the same about him. Like, I was going to look out for him and that I wanted him to do well in this race. That feeling that the other person is in it for you more than themselves is special, but it's what we should all like strive for. Specifically in marriage, I would say that's like the number one thing. And it takes time to build that trust. And even my wife and I, we've been friends since we were kids, and we dated for a couple of years before we got married. But even after we got married, even with all the knowledge and, familiarity we had of each other, it took a couple of years to build that trust where she knew that she didn't have to worry about her own welfare, because that was my priority more than anything. And then when she could let go of that, I became her priority. Having each other as their number one priority and knowing the other person has you covered is a special thing, and it helps, in every kind of relationship, but specifically in marriage. And so we definitely had that too going for us, that we knew that, we had the each other's welfare as our number one priority and not the other way around. That helps you get through things easier, because whenever we're self-focused, that's when you really start struggling mentally. When you're focused on yourself, on your own pain, on your own, trials and struggles, that's where you can start, getting defeated mentally. There's kind of like a phenomenon in SEAL training that the officers seem to have a better rate of making it through training, and there's a lot of theories on why that is. Like, officers do have to meet a lot of requirements to get a spot to go, and so they have a lot invested to get there. I'm confident that I know why. The officers are busy the entire time as they're getting harassed alongside the enlisted men. They're the boat crew leaders. So they're busy making sure that their boat crew has all the right gear on, that not some idiot didn't forget his belt or like something stupid like that. They're worried about all that thing. They're not worried about how cold they are, how tired they are, and how they want to stop. They don't have time to think about that stuff. But like an enlisted guy who doesn't have any responsibilities, all he's doing is in his head, doing his job. And so I tell young guys that want to go to SEAL training, I'm like, don't go to SEAL training being like, I'm looking out for me to make it. I need to make it. You need to go into SEAL training, pick a guy and be like, I'm getting him through, like, have that be your priority. Because if you do that, if you focus on your boat crew and their welfare, you're not going to be worried. It's going to be real easy to get through, your pain and your struggles that you're dealing with. And that's the case with like life. I use my marriage as an example to these guys, because when I'm focused on dealing with like my own stuff and I'm like spiraling mentally, and then when my wife needs me and she has something that needs my attention, then all my troubles fade away and I don't have time to listen to them. So it's a cool thing that happens when you put others before yourself. You can apply it to almost anything, but that's a big part of teamwork, I think, right there. And that's just been built through, for Chad and I, that's just been built through a friendship that's gone back for many years. So we kind of really automatically fell right back into that teamwork phase. But, also we've witnessed each other grow and mature. And so it was cool to be like, I really trusted him as a teammate back when he was young and I was young in the Navy, but now I trust him even more because I knew the man that he had become, and the level of maturity and integrity and faith that he had come to in his years. And so, and I think for him as well, like we realized that we're not the man that we used to be. We're better. We're more unselfish. And so that was like at least for me, a comfort to just have that complete faith in your teammate.
Yeah. Coach Mack used to always say, your teammate next to you is more important than you. And it took me like 4 weeks to understand that, because the moment he said that, I was like, I'm important too. It was all about me. And then one day I was absolutely freezing. It was a Tuesday. This is how much it impacted me. I remember it's like almost 8 p.m. I'm freezing. I'm soaking wet. All I'm thinking about is my beautiful bed that's so warm. And I look to the guy next to me, and he is just as cold as me. I mean, he is like purple, and all the hairs on his body is standing up, and he has all those goosebumps, and his teeth is chattering. And then I move closer to him, and I put my arm against his, and now I'm like gritting through my teeth, like so nobody can see me talk, like coaching him how to breathe and relax and stuff. And then suddenly, like, I'm out of my head, and I'm not cold anymore, and I'm all these other things that was so me centric as went away, and I got through it. And then that light bulb went off, and I go, oh, I get it now. That's why your teammate is more important than you, because when you help them, you're less in your head, you're less thinking about you. I think that's an amazing lesson that we can all take. And so I want to ask, as we come towards the end of the show, what, as you know, it didn't work out, right? You guys didn't complete that race. Talk to us about that, and then talk about how you felt afterwards, because when I was following this, Chad said something and you said something. Chad said, nobody knows what you personally go through from being paralyzed and living the life that you currently live, where there are limitations, right? That you have, that others can't understand or experience, right? And then you mentioned too, like, it's like it stings, it like hurts, because it still feels it's a failure, right? And it's really hard to confront and realize it's still a disappointment, no matter what. So walk us through that, because I also feel like that is something that's common, that not the whole physical and all that stuff, but like the whole disappointment or failure, or like you mentioned, nature sometimes it's just not in your control, or something that happens that doesn't make you succeed. How do you bounce back? How do you accept it? How do you move on from that? Like, talk to us about that.
We like this illusion that we are in control, but we're not, we really aren't. In this race, always one of the biggest risks for our team and me was that I would develop a skin wound or pressure wound, which is something that a lot of people with spinal cord injuries deal with, but I never have. I just been lucky. I have a healthy, good circulation, I guess. But most people, their circulation is affected in their part of their body that's paralyzed, and specifically your butt, since you're sitting all day, can be susceptible to pressure wounds. And it's basically, it starts as like almost like a bruise looking thing, a deep bruise, and the tissue starts dying and not getting blood supply. And it can eventually become sore and then open up. And then, I mean, it can get really bad. The bad thing about it is, for spinal cord injuries, because if the circulation's not good, it can take a really long time to heal. And basically you got to like lay on your stomach for a couple months in the hospital while it heals. We did talk about that. My wife and I were like, that's the one thing we like really can't let happen. And you can get them on your feet and stuff too. But I was like, if I get a pressure wound on my foot, I'll just chop it off when we get to Alaska or something, so like, but you can't chop off your butt. So my wife, already, we have 3 kids. She already spent 2 years taking the reins on school drop-offs and all this stuff so I could train, and then took the reins with the kids and all their busy schedule for a couple weeks for me to go up and paddle on a river. She's like, please, don't put yourself in a hospital up in Canada for like 3 months where you can't come back. And I was like, I'll be careful. So, that was like the one thing. So every night I would look and check on my skin to make sure it was looking okay. So, I've never had one, but I've also never sat in a kayak for 18 hours day after day. I spent a lot of time the past 2 years, like, thinking about the best way to sit in that kayak. And so I thought I had a pretty good system. And I guess for 3 days I did. And then on the 3rd night I check, Chad is outside the tent doing something, and I check and I see what it looks like a big bruise, like on one of my bones. And I'm like, I was like, oh, that's not good. Chad hears me and he's like, what? And I was like, hey, can you come look at this? Just so like, because I'm like, it's not easy for me to see. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's like not as bad as I think. And I had told him what to look for. I was like, it's going to look like a bruise, like kind of red and stuff. And And he comes around, he's like, it's exactly what you described. And I was like, I can't. I was like in disbelief because I knew that that was it. That was the end of the race. There's nothing. It's like, you can't push through that. Like it's just going to get worse, or, it's not like I can recover from it or protect it while I'm out there. So I just sat there for a second. I was like, I can't believe I just killed our race, and like me feeling responsible too, because like Chad's fine, he can keep going, but like I couldn't. And so I felt like I had let him down. We're still out in the middle of nowhere. So he's like, do you need to be like evac or something? Like, what are we going to do? And I was like, no. I was like, I can make it to the cutoff point. I think one more day of paddling, I can be okay for one more day, and then we'll have to get out. That kind of, and that was the day that we had that headwind for like 7 hours. And so we were already being like, okay, we're going to have to boogie to make this cutoff. And so after we realized that we're going to be done with the race in it one more day, we like woke up that next morning, and he said too, after, like, I was pretty upset, like when I was just like pissed, and he's like, hey man, we still got 18 hours of paddling tomorrow. Like, I'm going to need you. And I was like, I'll be on it, tomorrow. So that was all the conversation we needed, but it was a good reminder for him to say that, because it was like, I still am like in a dangerous situation for the next day. And it's not going to be an easy, like, just paddle in, like we're going to have to dig deep still. We wake up that next day and we're like, hey, we got to make the cutoff. Like, we can't like not make the cutoff. And people will be like, oh, they didn't make the cutoff anyways. That's why they pulled out. So we are like putting out that next day, and trying to protect my butt by like, on those breaks, I would like try to like sit up in the boat and stuff and like put some circulation. But we get to the end, we get to the cutoff point after, I think we paddled like 15 hours or something that day. We had to try really hard to make that cutoff. We got there, and then, it was like an emotional time. My coach was up there with his wife, like supporting us, and he was like choked up. And when I called my wife, she was like choked up, just disappointed for me, because they knew like that I would be like bummed. And so at the same time, I was like proud of myself for trying it, but I felt like that was probably it. I'd never get to do it again. And yeah, so we get out of the kayak, and it became apparent that I was having maybe more issues than I realized. My legs were swollen my legs on an average day are like, they look like a skeleton. There's just no muscle or anything. They were huge. They were bigger than Chad's legs, to the point where when I got out, they were like straight from being in the kayak, and I get in a wheelchair and they like slowly bent. They were like so sausaged out that they like couldn't bend. And I was like, okay, I'm having like an overall circulation problem that's caught that with the whole entire lower body. So I was like, I don't know what I could have done about that. It's just,
Right.
it
Yeah.
was just too much like on my body, I guess. And I told Chad too, like, it was good I had that last day to paddle to like kind of get over it and like not be so mad when I paddled in and see everybody. We had good conversations, and so you get a lot of good perspective on that last day, because we still had, like I said, it was still, each day was like doing an ultra marathon. It was 18 hours of hard work.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't really think about it that way until he said that. He was like, we just did 4 ultra marathons in a row. And I was like, because I was kind of feeling like a wuss. I was like, man, I can't believe my body can't handle this. It's like, we're only halfway there, like I felt like kind of, I don't know. I was like, and once I got out, I started having this like phenomenon that my body was just like dying. It was like,
Yeah.
everything was just crashing. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, dude, I felt like a wimp. And then, I'll go to the hotel room. Chad was like, I need to eat right now. And I'm like, right now, you don't want to like shower or something? Like, we smelled awful. And like, I was like, you don't want to change. I was paddling in my underwear and like a shirt. So I'm like in my underwear with no shoes. And, I'm like, you don't want to like change or something? He's like, no, I'm hungry right now. And I'm like, all right. So we're like sitting in the lobby of the hotel waiting for food in my underwear and just like, it's so dirty. And I'm like feeling like crap. And I'm like, dude, and it was taking a long time to get the food. So I'm like, I'm going to go shower real quick. And so I like go to the room, and I'm like taking a really long time to like change. I'm just moving so slow. Probably one of my favorite moments of the entire thing was, I think Chad was worried about me because I was taking a long time. So he came into the room just to check on me. He just like bent down. He was like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. And like and I told him I was proud of him too. And, you know, had like that moment. And it was just like, that's probably one of my favorite memories of it. But that was when I was like, man, I don't know if it's just because I'm paralyzed, but I'm like really hurting from this. Like my at other injury, my arm like swelled up like when we finished. It wasn't swollen while I was paddling, but as soon as I finished, it swelled up so much that it was like ballooning over my watch band. And I still don't really know what that was. But my elbows, I like have like tendonitis all over the place in this arm, like
Oh my
residual
God.
from that. So I'm still healing from that. We're like 2 months away, and I still have the pressure wound still up here. Like it's getting better, but it's still on my butt. So it takes long. It was kind of like for a couple weeks after the race, I was like, man, could I push through, you know? And I was like starting to doubt whether it was the right decision. But now like the pressure wound's still there. I'm like, yeah, okay, it was like an issue.
It was
Uh,
serious. Yeah.
yeah, it was serious. It was like not going to get better. It could have got really bad. It could have been, you know, a real issue out in wilderness where we didn't have any. Like if we kept going, and you know, it was just lucky that I had that injury a day away from a place where we could get out of the river. If that had happened a day later, I would have been screwed. I mean,
Right.
if we had to get out, we would have been calling like the military to like send a helicopter. I don't know what they would have done. It would have been a big logistical thing. So in one sense, it was lucky that it happened that day. The Chad pointed out too, because obviously I was the one struggling with the decision the most, you know, in the days following of being kind of bummed about not getting to finish because I felt like it was my fault. But he was like, you know, we're really lucky though that it was a non-option injury. Like it wasn't like a call we had to make. Like it was just
Right.
no choice. Like if it would been like some other injury, we would have had to make a choice. Like, do we need to keep going? Do we need to not? And then we would have always questioned, you know, if that was the right
Right.
choice. But this
Yeah.
one, we didn't have an option. So it kind of took the decision making off the table for us, which was good. But yeah, I think when I finished, you know, we had first form and cameras in my face and stuff. And I said, you know, I thought about it all day, and I was like, you know, it sucks because I knew everyone's going to be like, oh, you know, it's not a disappointment. Like you did good, and you know all that stuff, and that was going to piss me off. So I was thinking about it all day and what I was going to say, because I was like, I felt like I let Chad down. I felt like I let First Form down, who, you know, supported us for this race. Felt like I let my coach down, who drove 3,000 miles up to Canada to support us and drive 1,000 miles along the river to help us when we got out. And it was a good thing he was there because we needed, like, it's an unsupported race, so we don't really need support during the race, but I ended up needing my wheelchair halfway down the river. And so he had my
Right.
wheelchair. It was good. It was, you know, they were a godsend, you know, but I said, like, I came to the realization that it was good, that it was a disappointment, you know, to fail something. And because if there was, and that was what was exciting about doing the race, this is not a guarantee that you could do it. I didn't know if I could do it, you know, and an able-bodied person doesn't even know if they can do it. But if you know, if it's like a guaranteed win, like what's the fun and, you know, what's the reward in that? And so
Mhm.
it was that risk of failure that really makes it sweet, you know, to try. I'd heard about like the man in the arena, like, you know, I'm talking about
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if it's like a poem or what, but I like saw that a couple days after, or no, it's a friend of mine sent it to me, I think, and then I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's like what the realization that I came to, you know, is like it's better to be in the arena and try and feel, you know, the sting of failure than to just sit on the sidelines and wonder, you know. And so my wife's been really like a huge piece of that, a huge like motivation for me, because when I think I said in the last podcast too, when I got paralyzed, I was like, pissed that I wasn't going to get to be a SEAL and do all these things and the goals I had. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll just, I was like, I'm just going to sit on the couch and play video games for the rest of my life. That'll be fun. But it wasn't fun. It got old really fast. There's so many things that I'm like, I can't do that. Like I can't go to the beach. I can't do this. And my wife's like, yeah, you can just do it. Like, hey, go do it. Like, and she's always pushing me to like push the envelope as far as what I can do. She's like, well, we're going to go camping. I'm like, how am I going to go camping? Like, what am I going to do? She's like, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, all right, and I'm like, I wouldn't do that if she didn't make me. So it's funny because I hate camping, and then I like volunteered to go do this Yukon thing, which is like the worst camping ever. Just like being willing to go try and fail, and she always says like, hey, things are going to be frustrating. Like, be prepared for it to be frustrating. And it's can be frustrations, like whether it's flying with the airlines, they lose your wheelchair or something, and you're like, you can really be like, this is a disaster. But if you're just like, okay, I knew something like this was going to happen, it's so much easier to deal with. And I definitely use that advice on the Yukon a lot, especially during the land portions. I'm not going to like go into it a ton, but like, how do you think I like, went poop and stuff like out on the river, like I'll let you just like imagine how a person scooting around on the ground does that. And, it's just, it was not fun. All that stuff pissed me off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And I just had to be like, whatever, and Chad thought it was pretty funny sometimes, I think. But yeah, it was a disappointment, but it was good to have that day to reflect on it. And it was kind of interesting too, because like we're disappointed to not get to do the race, but by the time we were laying in our beds in the comfort of the hotel room, we were both like, screw that race. Like, I'm glad we're not doing it right now. But then a couple days after that, we were both like, man, like I wish we were finishing the race today, especially as we saw like the other teams finishing. We were excited for them, but we were like, oh man, like I think we could have done it, and I was like, the race director, as soon as we finished, he was like, hey, next year you got a spot. And I was like, we'll see. And I was trying to think of a nice way to be like, no, but and I just didn't think it was possible. It's like, okay, we found out my crippled body can't do it. But then it's like
Right.
the persistent person in me, like the weeks following, was like, what if we used a different seat, or like, how could we do, to the point of like, because we're like, maybe you need like compression or something on the legs. Do we need like active compression that's like, like like on a hospital bed where it like inflates around your legs and stuff. And we're like, can you fit that? Is there anything that fits in a boat that's small, that has, battery power supply, to the point where I'm at, like, this is a personal information, but like to the point where I'm like discussing amputating my lower legs. So not just for the race, but that'd be crazy. Like that, but that is something I'm thinking about, like, and if I do it, can I amputate them in time for next July, and be healed in time? So all that to say, I don't know what the future holds. I think both Chad and I would love to finish that race, but it's a huge commitment. It's a commitment financially. It's a commitment time-wise more than anything. Like what are we going to have going on in life that we can just drop everything and go up to the wilderness? To be honest with you, I really don't want to paddle across Lake LaBarge again, but you're going to have to do it. So yeah, that's kind of the lessons I learned, I guess, from, failing at something. And I tell people all the time, I'm like a professional failure. I have failed at so many things, and it's been kind of the theme of my life in a lot of ways. I tried to join the military, get kicked out of buds because I'm colorblind, come back again and actually make it. And then only to be my error during a parachuting jump causes me to lose that rest of that career and, the rest of, my lower half of my body. It's just like every step I feel like I've failed, but like God has worked that together to bless me. And, it's not about always succeeding. Like some things are out of your hands, some things you're going to fail if you try hard things. And you should try hard things. You shouldn't be afraid of failing. You don't do things, don't not do things because it's a chance of failing. That's, I think, the big lesson I want people to take from it, specifically my kids. I mean, I don't know what it is if all kids were like this, but it seems like this new crop of kids, they they really are resistant to like getting outside of that comfort zone, and
Yeah.
just fighting any type of adversity, like trying to avoid it. And so I'm trying to encourage that, and I hope that I can be a good example to them. I was fortunate enough to have the best dad in the world, and I want my kids to have that. They deserve it. I don't know if I'll ever be as good a dad as my dad, but just trying to be a good example. I know that hard things are going to come their way. Just everybody's going to get it, one way or another. And I want them to be able to handle it, the right way. Yeah. I mean, that's my goal. My number one goal is to be a good example for them. I think also men, the advice for husbands. I've been married over 10 years. I think we're on 11. We're coming up on 12 years of marriage. I think you should be every stage of your marriage be trying to impress your wife,
Mhm.
and like just when you're dating, you do stuff to try to impress them. And years later, you need to still be doing that, like even with stupid stuff like paddling down a river. Like I just want her to be proud of me, So I want to earn like her pride. And then, overall to people that I can affect around the world, like, whoever God puts in my path, I hope that I can be an encouragement to. And I really appreciate opportunities like this, getting to talk to you and use your platform to like do that. So it's a real privilege for me to use my story and, bad things that have happened to me, hard things that have happened to me to be a positive to other people. So it's a huge blessing to me to get to do this. So thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you. And thanks for sharing the story and telling us all about the race and all that stuff at the end. It was incredible. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And you just, drop so much knowledge and so much inspiration and motivation. You're inspiring to me. I always find you motivating after we talk. So thanks again for being on the show. I greatly appreciate you being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.